Welcome back to the Anchor Show, guys. My name is Andrew, and I am glad that you're here. Today's topic is, what does it mean to be a man in 2025? All right. So I'm going to start with just kind of taking a step back and look at tradition regarding men, right? Let's take a look at what it means traditionally to be a man. So traditionally, right, back in the days, way back in the days, as a man, you're expected to provide and you're expected to protect. And that's usually about where it ends, right? Provide and protect. You make sure that the household is financially taken care of. You make sure that your family have food, and you are a protector. So, if there's any danger or any kind of situation, you're there to put out that fire, so to speak, right? And also, to some extent, you're expected to lead. So you provide, protect, and lead. Okay. So I personally believe, though, that those are fundamental values of what it means to be a man. And yes, we are living in 2025 where things are different nowadays, but those are fundamental values which I do believe still stands, right? But I want to broaden our perspective just a little bit and take a deeper look as to what does it really mean to be a guy, to be a man in 2025, right? So we've already taken a look at what it's like traditionally, right? So let's add to that. What about things like leadership, right? Oftentimes, I feel like leadership isn't emphasized upon as much as providing and protecting, right? But leadership is critical, right? It is important for you as a man to be able to lead, especially those that are family men, right? So if you have a family, you have wife and children, right? You have a son, you have a daughter. It is your job, your expectation to lead your son from being a little boy in growing up to become a man, right? Teaching him the fundamentals. Yes, he's going to have his own identity, his own interest, and probably take on his own values. But there are those fundamentals that it is your expectation and responsibility to teach those, to pass those on, right? And it's not just about teaching, but you're living those values as well. Those principles, you are a living example of it. So you're not just leading with your words, but you're leading with your actions, right? The same applies to your daughter or daughters. You're going to teach her what it's like to have self-worth, self-respect, self-love. And, you're going to show her what it's like to be properly treated by a man, right? And so when she gets old enough and she goes out in the world and she's open and looking for relationships, you have already created that blueprint. You've already set that standard. And so if she abides by those standards, then everybody who's coming around, their game better be good, right? So that's part of leader. And leadership expands further into community. Like, what are you doing in your community? What are you doing in your neighborhood? Right? At work, what are you doing? Are you just following along and taking orders? Or are you stepping up and actually leading and taking charge and, owning projects and leading projects, etc., if there's an opportunity to do so, right? So leadership is an important part of being a man, whether 2025 or 1955, right? Doesn't matter. Another aspect of that is self-respect, right? Self-respect and self-control. Let's look at self-respect first. Self-respect, right? If you don't respect yourself as a man, you're going to more than likely mistreat yourself, right? You're not going to take care of yourself the way you're supposed to. You're not going to treat yourself the way you're supposed to, right? So you have to have self-respect, right? Part of that whole self-respect is also controlling your natural instinct of wanting to be out in the streets doing things that you're not supposed to be doing as a man, as a family man, as a married man, right? And even for single guys who, are essentially bachelors, it doesn't mean that you should be in the street running around with 5, 6, 7 women, right? Self-respect and self-control is another critical piece of what it means to be a man. Not because you're a man and you're tough and you're strong and you're macho and you're masculine and all that. It doesn't mean that each time there's a situation, it's just gonna escalate and get out of control. No, you have to have self-control, right? You got to have self-control. That's an important part of what it means to be a man. Another aspect of that, which is oftentimes like undervalued and even overlooked, is being that loving gentle giant. We've heard the term gentle giant before. Yeah, right? Part of being a man is also being gentle, being soft. Yeah. It's about being soft, being gentle, being loving to the right people in the right circumstances, right? It's not always macho. It's not always, alpha type. No, it's also being gentle with your wife, gentle with your children, right? Gentle with, people at work, right? There's a time and place for everything. And whenever it's time for you to be, macho, stand up and, go to work, there's a time for that as well. But we're not, you have to consider that as men, as people, we're not one of anything and that only. We are multifaceted. So the same way you can be alpha, in control, taking charge, you can also be gentle, calm, controlled, collected, and gentle whenever the situation dictates that, right? So it's about being a multifaceted person, or someone that is multifaceted, right? Being a multifaceted person that it's almost like a chameleon. You can fit into any situation whenever necessary and be who you need to be in that space when necessary, right? So, and the other aspect of the conversation surrounding what it's like to be a man is, what if you're not a provider? What if you're not a protector? What if you're not a natural leader? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of men, a lot of guys that they're not leaders. They're just not. Could they become one? Maybe, but they're just not naturally leaders. They're not a protector in the sense that they're going to, be the one to, say somebody break in, they're going to be the one to get the gun, get the some sort of weapon and go defend and go, protect. Right? And as far as providing, there are some dudes who are just not able to provide adequately or at all based on circumstances. So if you're not a provider, if you're not a protector, does that make you less of a man? Does that mean you're not a man as it is defined? I'm not going to be the one to say yes or no, right? That's a question for you to answer for yourself. But what I would suggest is, if you so happen to be in that position where you're not necessarily a provider, or you don't consider yourself a protector, it is your responsibility to get to that stage in your life, that phase in your life, before you take on relationships, before you take on, leading, like having children or parenting, etc. Right? Work on yourself. Work on those fundamental values and traits of becoming a provider, becoming a protector, being gentle, being self-aware, having self-control and self-respect, right? Own those principles, embody them, so that once you're in that position where now you're a dad, now you're a husband, a boyfriend, a fiance, whatever the title, now that you're in that position, you're able to fulfill these responsibilities of providing and protecting and leading, and being gentle and all of that, right? So go ahead and work on yourself. Do what you need to do to get to that point where you can be respected, right? Because let's be honest, if you're showing up as a man, calling yourself a man, and you're not really a provider, you can't really do much protecting, you're not a leader, you're not going to get a lot of respect. Not from women, not from your peers, not from nobody. And that's just being honest, right? I don't make these rules. It's just what happens, right? Society dictate those rules, and that's the truth. So we have to be prepared, work on ourselves. You know, at the very least, work on yourself. Make sure that you're able to provide for yourself. If nothing else, make sure you can provide for yourself and protect yourself. If nothing else, right? So, I would really like to hear what you guys have to think, right? I know that it's a little bit of a controversial topic. You know, and I know we live in a time where things are different, especially nowadays. You know, gender rules have shifted. It's been shifted for quite some time now, where you have a lot of females who actually make more money than guys, and they are actually doing a lot more financially in the household than their husbands and you know, male counterpart. So with that being said, it is vital for us to work on ourselves, to properly position ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically, economically, socioeconomically, every which way. We need to position ourselves so that when we show up as a man, whether you're a short guy, a tall guy, in between, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive, what kind of career when you show up as a man, you're showing up correct, and you can get that respect that you deserve. So that is our responsibility, to make sure we're doing our part to show up correct. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this topic. Let me know your thoughts. You know, feel free, go ahead and share those in the comment section. Shoot me any questions you might have, or just, you know, other perspective. I like to hear other people's perspective. You know, that's how you learn. So go ahead and share those with me. I'll be happy to hear that. And we can continue this dialogue and conversation, you know. The question I want to leave you with is, do you feel honestly in yourself right now that you are a man as it's prescribed by society? Do you feel like you're a man? Do you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be do? Do you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do to be considered a proper man? Right? Answer that question for me. You can answer it in the comment section. You can answer it amongst your friends. You can answer it by yourself. Doesn't matter. But either way, I want you to consider that question and come up with that answer. That is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for sticking around and for listening. I do appreciate the love and support. I appreciate the engagement. So go ahead, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and please share the video as well with anyone who you think would benefit from just listening to something positive, right? Until the next video, guys, let's continue to grow, evolve, and transform into the best version of ourselves. Peace out.